Okay, we are starting on time. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on wherever you are in the world, because it's a virtual conference and some of us might be in different parts of the world. So welcome to this first session on disaster risk reduction. I'm Gayan. I'm a senior lecturer in construction at Aston University, UK. I'll be co-chairing this session with Mr. Janath Hettiarachchi. Janath is a consultant at the UN World Food Program. Mr. Janath, may I ask you to introduce yourself briefly, please?
Thank you, Doctor. I'm working for the World Food Program as a consultant for the subnational level emergency preparedness and response. It's a great pleasure to attend this session. Over to you, Doctor.
Oh, thank you. By the way, Mr. Janath, as far as I know, is a retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Sri Lankan Army as well. Obviously, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the security forces, Triforces, and all the security personnel who have worked very hard to make the country. As a Sri Lankan, I'm a Sri Lankan. I've got a Sri Lankan background as well. So to make the country a safe place for us. And you played a huge role in that. So it's brilliant. And now we are continuing those efforts to secure the country against a different sort of a threat, disaster risk. It's a great privilege to sort of co-chair the session with you. Thanks for joining. We are going to have a number of interesting presentations, 6 presentations today. It's very interesting because the presentations are coming from a number of backgrounds. We have presentations on weather and climate projections, climate conditions, weather conditions. Then we have presentations on technical measures of resilience that can be incorporated into our built environment. We have presentations on social issues, economic issues, so it's going to be very interesting. What we are going to do is that I'm going to invite the presenters to present. They make the presentation, the video will be played, and then at the end of the session, we will take a couple of questions. At the end of every session, we'll take a couple of questions. You can unmute your microphone and ask questions, and then we will move into the next one. And if we have time at the end, we will come back to the questions. And also during the presentation, you can use the chat function to ask any questions as well. At the end of the presentation, I will direct these the questions. If anything comes through the chat function, we will direct them to the respective presenters. Okay. If you want to ask a question at the end of the presentation, please unmute your microphone when you're given the opportunity and ask away. One thing that I would like to do is to ask you to sort of reflect on, especially all the presenters. I will come back to you at the end of the session for the final plenary, because we have to go back to the organizers and give our summary findings in relation to the Colombo 2020 Disaster Risk Reduction Declaration. Which is going to come up with a sort of a roadmap for disaster risk reduction and to integrate the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction 2015-2013 in the context of Sri Lanka. So if you can think of how your research can contribute towards that agenda, towards that Colombo 2020 disaster risk reduction declaration, please reflect on that, and we will have a discussion on that at the end of the technical session. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to invite the first speaker. First speaker is from University of Canterbury, New Zealand, presenting on her PhD. She's on study leave from the University of Colombo. Unnati Samaravira. Unnati is going to talk about flood survivors and flood dependents. I think it's an important issue, especially in the context of Sri Lanka right now, with the implementation of this new disaster insurance, etc. as well. So without further ado, can I ask the Buddhi to play the video from Unnati, please?
Sure, sir. Hello, I am Unnati Samaravira. My topic is flood survivors or flood dependents, a societal reading of flood victims in urban Sri Lanka. Directly moving to the introduction, though the narratives of flood-affected communities are pivotal to understand the post-disaster context, they remain often neglected while developing DRR programs in Sri Lanka. People who live in by Kalani Riverside in, say, community not only because of their geographical location itself, but also due to their socioeconomic backgrounds. Therefore, this study aims to examine the role of flood-affected people in the post-flood disaster context, particularly during reactive recovery and reconstruction stages. Here, map 2 indicates Kolonnawa in Sri Lankan map, and map 1 is a snapshot of Sedawatha Gamaniladari division. The research problem investigates multiple effects on the socioeconomic relations of flood survivors during a post-disaster context in Sedawatha, Sri Lanka. Speaking of methodology, using the purposive sampling method, this research is based on 50 questionnaires with flood-affected households, 25 in-depth interviews with flood-affected people, and 2 structured interviews with officials in Sedawatha Gamaniladari division in Kolonnawa. Moving to key findings and discussion, first I would like to provide 2 quotations from interview transcripts. Meena said, "When we hear that flood is about to reach, my brother-in-law came in his van. We hired a small lorry and left the house immediately. We took almost every valuable thing with us. Luckily, we did it because when we came back to check on the house after the flood, the house was muddy and fully ruined. So my husband and I came with some male relatives and cleaned the house before returning back." Another interview participant, Geetha, said, "We did not have any financial background to leave houses before the flood. Even when the army soldiers came to support the cleaning and rehabilitation of affected households, we felt very grateful. The class dimension and available social supportive networks have played a major role during the reactive recovery and reconstruction phases of flood-affected people. Most of the flood-affected males were daily laborers whose income source is largely derived from the informal sector. Even their wives were from informal sector because they were either housewives, domestic servants on a daily income basis, or temporary cleaning staff. When they faced flood hazard, not only were they financially ill-equipped to deal with such hazards, but they also suffer with temporary unemployment, which later extended to permanent unemployment. Therefore, flood-affected people with low-income financial and social support backgrounds in Sedawatha can be identified as flood victims who have experienced an unexpected flood magnitude and have become helpless and powerless financially, socially, and politically. As depicted in diagram 1, the research findings suggest though flood-affected people have different narratives on socioeconomic impact and responses during and post-flood disaster context, a common identity as flood victims has been formed among low-income flood-affected people in terms of leaving their houses only with carryable things such as mobile phones, a few clothes, jewelry, and some documents, staying in temporary places, temporary unemployment leading to permanent unemployment, loss of livelihood, loss of materials, coming back to damaged houses, feeling of fear, insecurity, loss, and brokenness. Even though their identity reflects their victimization, the unexplored element is how they attempted to resume their lives as flood survivors as opposed to victims. Flood-affected victims returned to their damaged households immediately within 2 weeks to 1 month after the flood. With the help of government rescue teams, including the Army and Navy soldiers and non-affected voluntary support groups, they cleaned their houses and attempted to restart their lives. As further depicted in the green color box, they were utilizing available strengths and capacities to adapt and to settle back while facing various economic, health, social, and political difficulties. At this point, their identity as flood victims transforms into flood survivors. The researcher refers to them as flood survivors due to the strengths and capacities they have shown in relation to settling back in their damaged households, again specifically highlighting the transformation they have shown from the first interview during the reactive phase to the second interview during the recovery phase. Moving to the central argument of this presentation, now I am going to illustrate how flood-affected people who gradually grew from flood victims to flood survivors have later transformed into flood dependents instead of emerging as resilient flood survivors. During the recovery and reconstruction process, it was evident that flood survivors looked for all possible financial and material support provided by non-affected communities, including the government. The material support, such as clothing, dry food, so on and so forth, have made these recipients preoccupied with their material needs without paying much attention to developing long-term recovery plans and future mitigation plans among themselves, as depicted in this pink color box. I'm reading few quotations from their narratives. Now we do not have any income. The government should take the lead and provide us more assistance. We hope somebody will come and distribute more aid. Nobody cares for us now. Focusing on flood-affected people in the post-disaster context, in this presentation, a dependency mentality is defined as a state where people who are affected by the flood hazard continuously expect to fulfill their financial, material, social, and psychological needs through other non-affected parties, including the government, without attempting to rehabilitate by using their own social capital available to them. Their notion of waiting for more aid and overwhelming material dependency upon any goods distributed as aid prove the fact that the flood victim identity have eventually transformed into flood dependent as opposed to flood survivors. When the survivors of the most roof-damaged households received asbestos sheets to repair their roofs, others who did not have their roofs damaged also went and complained. They also needed it. When a water rehabilitation program and a garbage collection programs were carried out in the affected area, the support and participation of the flood-affected community was at a minimum. They have a list which was provided to anybody who they thought would come with aid. 6 months after the flood, the majority of flood-affected narratives of low-income residents revealed a notion of financial and material dependency upon non-affected communities and other supporting agencies, including the government. They believe that the sole responsibility of flood risk reduction is upon the government authorities. This shifting of responsibility to external entities has been part and parcel of dependency mentality of flood-affected survivors who have become dependents due to the disaster. In conclusion, this presentation argued how flood-affected people, being a vulnerable group, understand themselves and are presented by external agencies. They become flood victims during the reactive stage who transform themselves into flood survivors and then subsequently become flood dependents during recovery and reconstruction stages with the continuous flow of financial and material support provided by external entities, including the government. I would like to acknowledge my supervisors, Dr. Alison Lavridge and Dr. Ed Charles from the University of Canterbury, the Commonwealth Scholarship Program, and also University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. These are my references. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thanks very much, Unnati, for the presentation. We do have Unnati with us in the session. So any questions to Unnati? Any queries, questions from the audience? You can raise your hand and then we can give the opportunity, or you can unmute your microphone and ask away. We don't have that many people in the session. We have 15 or so 12. So you can always ask questions. Any questions from the audience? I'll ask a question. Unnati, now it's very interesting how kind of people tend to depend, especially on low income households, how people tend to depend on government support and external support. How now we are talking about disaster risk reduction, preparedness, resilience, etc. How can we promote active preparedness or sort of take these people towards preparedness aspect and make them understand the importance of preparedness, make them engage with the whole preparedness agenda? Is there any way of supporting that initiative, or is it impossible? What do you think?
Thank you very much for your question, Dr. Gayan. I think actually this research, the findings I presented today, that research I conducted during 2016, just after the 2016 major flood occurred in Sri Lanka, especially affecting Kolonnawa. So my PhD study is sort of an extension of the same flood affected people in two different locations in Kolonnawa and Tavalama in Galle. So what I think, I have like recently completed my PhD fieldwork during my stay in Sri Lanka. So what I have found from the recent research is sort of it's a lack of community resilience. So I suppose we should pay more attention onto local government initiatives and how to incorporate community level community participation into DRR activities, because I think that is the level we should accommodate the exact narratives of disaster affected communities.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there any questions from the audience? Any questions, comments from the audience? Not. I'll ask one more. Unnati, obviously now in Sri Lanka, your research is on the Sri Lankan context, and now in Sri Lanka there is this disaster insurance, which sort of provides a higher degree of support to the victims. How do you think that can affect your findings in relation to people becoming flood dependents?
I think it's a very good initiative. I'm not too sure about how the implementation process is happening for the moment, because according to my research, like recent research findings, this Kolonnawa people, I focused on 2016 flood in Kolonnawa and 2017 flood in Tavalama. So in the both field locations, they haven't received any compensation related to flood damage happen to like flood damage related vehicles damaged, basically flood related vehicle damages. And for the tea in Galle, they have like a small tea plantation, so they haven't received any compensation related to tea plantation and the agricultural lands. So for the vehicles it was same. So I think it's a very good initiative, but I'm not too sure about the implementation and whether they are really aware about the about this new initiative for the moment.
And as you say, there may be certain aspects which are sort of excluded from that initiative as well.
Yeah. And I think it's more about like we have actually developed very good structures, but it's more about the gaps and challenges in the implementation processes in DRR related activities in Sri Lanka.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, Mr. Janath, from what you have observed in practice? Any comments on this?
Yes, Doctor. I think 2016 and 17 case is an extreme case. But in other, now we, as you said, we have the National Insurance Fund scheme, and it is covering the house damage and not covering the personal vehicles. But it also covers the small, medium, their own income generation project up to 2 million. But this is all some people are not aware, and it takes some process and time consuming. Okay, but I think now at the moment we have a contingency planning process for all the monsoons, and people are a little more aware. But this 2016 and 17 case is the extreme case that is totally not prepared well. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Unnati, and thank you, Mr. Janath, as well. Thank you. So the next presentation, that what Mr. Janath said about the economic aspect, SMEs leads us nicely to the next presentation. Next presentation is going to be on the impact of tsunami on heterogeneous economic sectors in Sri Lanka. The presentation is going to be from Sajivani Veerasekara. Sajivani is working at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. I think this the research is part of her PhD at Queensland University of Technology, Australia. Over to you, Sajivani.
Good afternoon. I'm Sajivani Veerasekara, representing Queensland University of Technology and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. This study was conducted as a part of my PhD on impact of climate-induced disasters on different economic sectors, under supervision of Professor Cleo Wilson, who is co-author of this paper. In this presentation, I will present the objective of this paper and then briefly talk about the background. After that, I will explain the methodology used and then present the results. As a beginning, I will talk few things that made us to do this study. Impact of natural disasters are obviously in an increasing trend in terms of frequency and also magnitude. This makes economies to bear the enormous cost due to loss of human lives and damages to productive capital. As per the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters, in 2018, the damage caused by disasters were around 12,000 deaths, 68.5 million affected, and 131 billion damages to the economies. Further, you can see from 2008 to 2017, on average, 67,000 deaths, 198 million affected, and around 166 billion damages. When we focused on different regions and specific countries, we can see during the period of 1970 to 2015, developing Asia and Japan were the hardest hit region by disasters. If we specifically looked into our own country, according to the Global Climate Risk Index, Sri Lanka's second place in 2017 in terms of disaster impact. And also in 2016, it was fourth place. And also MDAT database, according to the MDAT database, Sri Lanka is among top 10 countries by human. Why do we choose Sri Lanka for this study? From the left-hand side graph, you can see the number of people affected by disasters in Sri Lanka is in increasing trend from 1965. And also from the right-hand side graph, you can see the agricultural share of GDP is around 30% in 1980s. However, currently it is less than 10%. Parallelly, the services sector has been increasing. Considering the literature on impact of disasters on different economic segments and the outlook of the Sri Lankan economy, we will find out the impact of disasters on different economic sectors. Do the impact of disasters vary between regions, and do some regions cope better with natural disasters? How do different segments of the economy perform after disaster event? For this study, our dataset comprises GDP of different economic sectors and the disaster index constructed for the purpose of measure the impact of disasters. The index was constructed by normalizing the population affected from disaster event by population of previous year. We have taken it as a percentage. The method we utilized were difference in difference analysis, which was used by Matsuke and Managi in their 2016 paper on evaluating the impact of Hanshin Awaji earthquake in Japan, where YT is the log of GDP for different economic sector variables, agriculture, industry, and services. Damaged is a dummy equal to 1 if province is situated in devastated area. After is dummy equal to 1 if it is 2005 or 2006. Control is selected as a control variables and is error term. In PIVA X analysis, it facilitates the exploration of an external shocks on the economy, where Y represents the vector of endogenous variables, namely GDP for agriculture, industry, and services. X is exogenous variable, which forms the basis of the tsunami index. Percentage of population affected by tsunami. T stand for time and it stand for error term. If we move into the results, first I will explain the results of DIT analysis. In 2005, there was around 7% decline in growth for both agriculture and industry. However, in 2006, only the agriculture sector showed negative impact, while both the industry and services sectors grew significantly. In 2007, the growth was continued through the year, although the impact on agriculture continued to be negative. Even though these results are indicative, they help to confirm that the agriculture sector is the most highly impacted sector from disasters, while the industry and services sector have shown. If we move to another results table, in here we can see the damage after interaction variable is negative and significant for agricultural sector, confirming the results of the previous analysis. However, for industry, it is positive and significant, while for the services, the sign is positive but not significant. In this table, interaction with the year dummies for 2005 and 2006 are negative and significant for the agricultural sector, while the interaction term for the year 2007 dummy is not significant. The industry and services sectors show a negative impact only in the first year. Thereafter, it is positive. As described earlier, the tsunami impacted coastal areas of Sri Lanka, while the south, west, and east coast suffered considerably more damages than other areas. In this analysis, provincial dummies were employed instead of a year dummy. The agricultural sector in all three provinces show a negative sign, and also it was significant for East and West provinces. For the southern province, the interaction did not show a significant impact. These negative impacts on the agricultural sector should be mainly due to damage to the fisheries sector, which is around 10% of agricultural GDP and accounts for a considerably higher share in eastern and western provinces. Interestingly, dummy interactions for the industrial and services sector in the Western province are highly significant and positive, implying an increase of GDP in both the sectors of the Western provinces as a result of the tsunami. Being the capital province, which includes Sri Lanka's capital city, the Western province is the most industrialized as well as the hub of the country's services sector. These results indicate the increase in demand for reconstruction and building back better infrastructure after disasters, as well as considerable aid and grants being received for advancement of the industrial and services sectors. Further to that, the services sector generates more services during a catastrophic event and also increases the GDP of the sector. These backgrounds might surely contribute to the results. If I present you the results of PIVA-X analysis, results on the impulse responses of different economic sectors to the tsunami shocks are presented in this figure, suggest that the instantaneous effect of tsunami shock is first significantly negative for agricultural sector, but subsequently becomes stable after few years. The instantaneous effect of tsunami shock on the industrial sector is positive but not significant. However, the pattern itself gives insight into the industrial growth after such a devastating event. The previous results as well as the past literature support this conclusion. A possible reason for this behavior is that after a disaster, government typically take an action to immediately repair damaged infrastructure. As well, new machinery and technology are likely to be purchased by governments, which may be funded by foreign aid and can also improve the sector's growth. The immediate impact for the services sector is negative and significant, although it became positive over time with some fluctuations. With a very high magnitude disaster, the extensive destruction of the human capital and infrastructure employed in the sector produces an immediate slowdown in the sector's growth. However, it can be stabilized with few years with replacement of human. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sajivani, for the presentation. We do have Sajivani in the audience, so any questions to Sajivani from the audience? Any questions from the audience? Not, I will ask question. Sajivani, now it's very interesting. I've done a bit of research as well on tsunami effect on, especially in the SME sector in Sri Lanka. So the question that I'm asking sort of is related to that as well. Now, have you sort of observed in terms of the district level or the province level analysis that you have done? Have you observed any relationship between the directly affected regions and kind of central parts of the country which wasn't directly affected by the tsunami?
Thank you, Dr. Gayan. Actually, in that DID analysis, it is take the that analysis took the western, southern, and eastern province as the main variables but others are like control variables. So that, from that analysis, the thing you mentioned has been addressed. Compared to the other provinces, these devastated provinces were taken into account.
I see. Thanks for that. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm here. Hello.
Go ahead, Sajivani.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think you heard my response to your query.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, the reason why I asked is because you've noticed that in some industry sectors, there has been obviously positive impact as well after the tsunami because of reconstruction work, etc. And similarly, obviously, there's the direct impacts, direct economic impacts, as well as indirect economic impacts as well. And similarly, as you have said, some sectors seem to have experienced a positive impact from the tsunami as well because of the post-disaster recovery efforts and the need for reconstruction activities, etc., isn't it?
Yes, of course. We can, from that analysis, we can clearly see the industrial sector and services sector has positive outcome. That the main thing we so from this analysis is the agriculture sector is the most highly affected economic sector. However, with some aids and some government initiatives, it can be positive after few years of the disasters. So the policy implement that policy formulation and implementation is very important in this regard.
Thank you very much. And also it sort of, I think, highlights the need for preparedness for individual businesses. If they prepare well, and if they can survive the disaster themselves, then they can make use of the economic opportunities provided by the disasters. But for that to happen, obviously individual businesses will have to be prepared for a disaster so that they don't go bust from the impact of a disaster.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sajivani. Any observations, Mr. Janat?
Thank you. This is, I think, very good presentation. We have cleanly seen that with the tsunami, that's where a lot of other industries have been developed. I think, as Dr. mentioned, this is a good opportunity for the industries to analyze the situation, be prepared for their investment. Because in other countries, like in the USA, and there are a lot of industries are ready to support in disasters. That's also a very good point we can highlight. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Mr. Jana. Thank you, Dr. Gayan, and thanks for everyone.
Thanks, Sajivani. Thanks, Janat. Thank you. So from a social issue, we discussed an economic issue. Now we move into a technical issue in relation to property level disaster resilience. So the third presentation is going to be from Nimasha. Nimasha is a research assistant at University of Moratuwa, attached to the Institute of Content Surveyors, Sri Lanka, IQSSL. She is going to talk about the applicability of drywall partitioning in disaster relocation projects. Buddhi, can you play the video, please?
Sure, sir.
1 month ago, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies reported that the typhoon crisis of Philippines wrecked more than 305,000 homes. And obviously, it's a major typhoon to its economy as well. Here's the rectification of the economy highly depends on how quickly the community can bounce back to the normal living conditions. How quickly? So it's time. In fact, time matters. What I am going to present about is explicitly related to this time matter. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am Diluk Chechen from University of Moratuwa. I am here to deliver a research on the applicability of drywall partitioning in disaster relocation projects. As far as the research outline is concerned, research findings comprehend both literature and empirical findings. Obviously, outline leads us to the research background. As you can see, bottlenecks of disaster relocation contain 5 domains. Out of those 5, the third priority of the Sendai framework highlights the need of reviving incompetent construction technologies. Therefore, it's a crucial area to research. Especially among various building technologies, wall construction technology highly impacts the overall efficiency of post-disaster house reconstruction. It is because of the high requirement of materials and labor hours when using traditional wall construction technologies. Literature synthesis highlights the performance of drywall technologies. In example, it has already established the better performance of drywall technologies for earthquake-induced disaster relocation projects. Thus, this study focused on measuring the applicability of drywall technologies for disaster relocation projects. Further, this study focused on the time-related performance of drywall technologies. The problem is how we can answer to this research question. So let's take a look into aim and objectives. Our aim was to investigate the time-based performances of drywall technologies in response to integrated challenges of disaster relocation. As the intermediate milestones of this study, first it was review the time-related challenges probed in disaster relocation and sorted out wall construction challenges. Next, examine time-based performance of drywall technologies. And finally, rank different drywall technologies against time-related wall construction requirements. As indicated in the slide, there were certain limitations when achieving objectives of this research. Now I'd like to discuss the research methodology we adopted. This study experienced a mixed research approach as both qualitative and quantitative data were collected from the preliminary interview and questionnaire survey respectively. Preliminary interview process was carried out with 3 experts, 2 experts from disaster relocation and 1 expert from drywall technologies. All 3 were having more than 10 years of experience from their respective fields. A sample of 48 experts was obtained for the questionnaire survey from 4 different fields to consolidate the findings. 3 quantitative data analysis tools were used, skewness, standard deviation, and mean weighted rating. So now we come to the next section of the presentation, which is research findings and analysis. Here, OB code refers the relative objective of the study achieved. Time is a challenging parameter for disaster relocation because it is urgent to rectify the normal routine of the community as well as to prevent spontaneous irregular resettlements on unsafe lands. When it comes to wall construction challenges, traditional wall construction technologies show a lack in performance in terms of time for disaster relocation projects because of its high time consumption during on-site process. Existing research has already investigated the time-related performance of several drywall technologies for disaster relocation projects. In example, one study revealed that EPS panels consume 1.5 days of unskilled labor for a 130 square foot room, referring to the Sri Lankan context. So let's turn the discussion into empirical findings. Preliminary interview analysis divided the time efficiency requirement of wall construction into 2, on-site efficiency and off-site efficiency. Next, questionnaire survey rank those 2 requirements representing the priority level for disaster relocation. Ranking was based on mean weighted rating values obtained from analyzing the responses of the questionnaire survey. Let's talk about the scorecard of 10 different drywall technologies. Now, the matter is where these drywall technologies came from. Literature synthesis reflected of 18 possible drywall technologies, but experts of the preliminary interview omitted 8 drywall technologies considering the availability for a mass construction such as disaster relocation in Sri Lanka, and ultimately shortlisted into 10. Each score represents the feasibility of each drywall technology under each time efficiency requirement. Here, scores are mean weighted rating values obtained from analyzing the responses of the questionnaire survey. At the upper right corner, you can see the color code, which delineates the feasibility levels of drywall technologies. According to the color code, first three are most feasible drywall technologies under both on-site and off-site efficiency requirements, and rest of the scores situate within the higher feasibility range. I think this graphical illustration clearly shows the ranking of the overall time-based performance of different drywall technologies for disaster relocation. It's a descending order from top to bottom. Mean weighted rating values obtained from the scorecard was applied to this equation in order to derive the overall time-based feasibility of each drywall technology. As you can see in the graphical illustration, it delivers gypsum board partitions as the most efficient drywall technology for disaster relocation projects. And calcium silicate wall panel board comes next in the order. In any research, the most important part is how we can use the findings in reality. Therefore, to put the findings into practice, recommendations focus on enhancing the awareness of the time-related benefits of different drywall technologies to donors, victims, and families at risk. Earthquake-resilient characteristics of drywall technologies are already established, as I previously mentioned, but it needs further research and developments to test the other resilient characteristics as well. Now I can just summarize the main points again, clustering into the objectives of this study. Traditional wall construction consumes 44% of the total project timeline in disaster relocation projects. Literature provides a narrow view of the time-related performance of drywall technologies, roughly establishing the 3 to 4 times higher performance of drywall technologies. Scorecard facilitates a comparative analysis of the time-based performance of different drywall technologies to practice in disaster relocation projects. Finally, gypsum board, calcium silicate panels, and cement bonded particle board represented the best performance under on-site time consumption efficiency. And gypsum board, calcium silicate panels, and glass fiber reinforced panels became top ranks under off-site time consumption efficiency. And ultimately, this research will be a crucial investigation to resettle both victims in disaster relocation and families at risk. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Nimasha, for the video and the presentation. We do have Nimasha with us in the audience. So, any questions to Nimasha? Any questions? We do have more people in the audience as well. So please do engage and ask questions. Get any issues that you have clarified from our presenters. Any questions to Nimasha in the audience? Can't see anything in chat. Okay. While we wait for a question, Nimasha, have you observed drywall partitioning being used in any sort of post-disaster reconstruction or relocation project in Sri Lanka as of now or previously?
No, not yet. Drywall technologies are currently not used for disaster relocation projects in Sri Lanka, even though drywall technologies have a spectrum of advantages for house reconstruction, especially regarding the time efficiency, but NBRO is still researching on the use of drywall technologies. I think this piece of research would inherently be supportive for the way forward of the combination of drywall technologies and disaster relocation projects.
Okay, that's very interesting. It's good to hear that NBRO is sort of engaged in that research as well. Another question: how do you what do you think about the resilient aspect of drywall technology? Say, for example, if the same area, let's say that we're talking about a flood prone region, and if the same area gets flooded again, would drywall partitioning and drywall techniques offer a good level of resilience against a
Sorry,
similar?
sorry.
No, the question is, Nimasha, now in relation to property reconstruction or relocation, a sort of a concept that we consider is sort of building back better, making the house or the property resilient to disaster, accepting that a similar event can happen in the future as well. So if we compare drywall partitioning or drywall techniques against a traditional method like plastering, rendering, etc., how do you think that compares? Have you sort of thought about that aspect in your research?
Yes, I have thought about that. In example, as I mentioned in my presentation, drywall technologies are already established for earthquake-induced disaster relocation projects.
Okay.
But it has not measured the resilient characteristics for other disaster induced reconstruction projects, such as landslide induced disaster reconstruction projects. There are different characteristics in different drywall technologies. So we can investigate the disaster resilient characteristics of each and every drywall technologies available within the Sri Lankan context. Here I have taken the 10 drywall technologies which are available within the Sri Lankan context and compared the time efficiency.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that, Nimasha. Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions from the audience to Nimasha? Any observations, Mr. Janath, considering the building back a better agenda and the need to facilitate speedy reconstruction, etc.?
Thank you, Doctor. I think she mentioned about the time efficiency. What about the cost efficiency?
Yes, it is also a matter of fact. Throughout my original research, we have evaluated the cost factor as well. For this presentation, I only present about the time efficiency.
Okay, thank you.
Is the cost aspect positive, Nimasha? What do you think?
Yes, with regards to conventional wall technology, yes, absolutely positive.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I add something to the declaration?
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of my presentation, I talk about the time efficiency. Sure, it is. We should implement BBB concept. Always already known fact BBB concept. We should adhere into disaster resilient characteristics. We all know. But in parallel, time efficiency should be ensured throughout the reconstruction process because we should consider both concepts, BBB concept, disaster resilient characteristics, but we need to do reconstruction process as swift as possible. We have to bounce back into the normal conditions as soon as possible. So it should be always a parallel fact.
Okay, that's a very good suggestion, and also considering the social issues with people being affected and people being displaced as well, I guess. Thank you very much, Nimasa. That's very interesting. And continuing the discussion on technical issues, now we move into the fourth presentation. It's going to be from Dr. Achinta from University of Southampton, UK. Achinta is going to talk about high-performance glass bolted joints for disaster risk reduction glass structures. Buddhi, can you play the presentation, please?
Sure, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mithila Chinta. I'm from University of Manchester, UK. And you will see that the content of my presentation may not be directly fall within the main scope of this symposium, but however, you will still find some useful and relevant information. So before talk about the technical content of this presentation, I would like to say from where I am. I'm from University of Manchester. Manchester is the city of Manchester is second largest metropolitan area in England after London, and it's in the northwest part of the country. Actually, University of Manchester involved with so many science and engineering discoveries for over last 200 years. It's starting from things like nuclear physics or atoms to more recent findings such as graphene, and also other innovations such as so many new discoveries in fluid dynamics and modern computing and artificial intelligence. Not only the historical prestige, Manchester is still one of the most well-known universities in the UK as well as world. It's actually the largest university in the UK. Currently, it's ranked number 27 in the world. And when it's come to UK rankings, it's ranked number 5 after the Golden Triangle of universities. So Golden Triangle forms University of Cambridge, University of Oxford, and a couple of universities in London, UCL and Imperial College London. So Manchester is the top university after that Golden Triangle. So which is all good to know that still perform not only in the past, currently also Manchester is quite highly reputed in the world. Good. So moving to my presentation, I talk about glass in buildings, and then risk and disasters, and then say why glass is a concern when it's come to disaster reduction, and then a new prospect for resilient glass structures. We all know that glass is increasingly becoming a more popular construction material. The main reason architects really like it because of its aesthetics characteristics. Glass is durable and cheap, and also it's recyclable. So these days, this recycling of material, the circular economy type things are really useful. You can make perfect glass from using old glass, which is not true for most other materials. As I said previously, it can improve the daylighting characteristics, and also we can gain solar energy as well as solar heating. However, unfortunately, although glass has so many favorable characteristics, it has some issues as well. It's usually the most fragile part of a structure under an extreme loading event. For example, as you can see on these two photos, these are real situations or real situation in the past. You can see in both cases, glass panels were removed from the building, whereas the main structure or the other part of the structure remain largely intact. So which shows a clear problem with glass when during in an extreme event. So the reason for that, actually the inefficiency of the joints we used, and as you can see, we use number of designs like bolted joint connection. This one shows connecting glass panels into glass panels using this type of joint, and this joint shows connecting glass panel into a main structure, and this type of joints are called spider joints. So you may not surprise the name spider joints. Yeah, I mean people use this one, but unfortunately it's not the most efficient and safe, because we know, I mean, glass is a brittle material, low tensile strength compared to steel or aluminium. Whereas, and to make holes, so we had to to make joints, bolted joints, so we had to make holes. So we damaged the surface. So which means we weaken the surface at the highly localized stress concentration areas. So obviously, it's not, I mean, high stress concentration, weak material. Obviously, it's not surprising we will see failures at the joints. Because of this, in most glass structural design, joints design govern the actual design. So which result in usually thick and heavy panels, because you need to make sure joint is at least can carry the loads. It's not efficient, obviously. Okay, good. So what we did in terms of our research program, we tested few glass bolted joint configuration. You can see 2-layer glass. I mean, we fixed 2 glass specimens using a bolted joint arrangement. And you can see we use aluminum plates to connect the test specimen into the loading machine, because we can't fix glass directly into the loading machine, so that will crack glass prematurely. So that's why glass is a difficult material to handle, to be honest. So we did this arrangement. So we tested this loading arrangement, and these are called anneal glass, which is the basic glass. And you can see, as expected, the failure happened across the bolted joint. You can see the here and here, and the middle area, which is the far away from the joints, remain mostly intact. Intact, not mostly. The reason for that, as I said, stress concentration and weak material close to the joint. So obviously we are wasting the material in the middle region because joint caused the failure. Then this is, as I said, this is the anneal glass. There's the other type. It's called heat strengthened glass or tempered glass, which have high tensile strength. So people solve that issue with low tensile strength capacity, a low strength characteristic of glass by using this strengthened glass. But unfortunately, strengthened glass are not solved. Strengthened glass alone cannot solve the problem, because this is the failure of the same joint configuration with strengthened glass. And actually you can't see glass. They failed into very small pieces, so it's not safe, and you can't recommend this type of failure in a structure because it completely collapses. Yeah, so what we did, so we got some motivation from reinforced concrete concept, because concrete alone is a similar material to glass with low tensile strength. So, but however, we know people use reinforced concrete for over 100 of years with very successful very successful applications. That's because they apply some reinforcement, steel reinforcement, where they can take the tensile stresses, whereas concrete still can remain in compression. So we got that motivation and tried to see whether we can reinforce glass, because glass itself a brittle material like concrete. So we use glass fiber reinforced polymer, GFRP. Then we joined a small GFRP strip to reinforce the joint around the joint area. And this is the test specimen looks like, and we arrange in the same test specimen with the aluminum plates at the end, and we tested, and you can see this GFRP strips covered the joint area. Okay, good. When we did that, actually we got the failure gain across the joint area, and the middle part, which means far away from the joint, remain intact. But however, we can see joint, and you can see some nick in this load time diagram. That's where we think actually we compared with the visual observation and audio observation as well. So we realized small cracks started to form here. However, since GFRP reinforcement was holding glass without allowing for major cracks to propagate, it managed to increase the load up to here, and then the first glass sheet failed, and you can see a drop in the load, and then the second glass tried to pick up the load, but it also failed, and then the load drops like here. But however, it didn't drop to zero like in the reference specimen, Instead, the GFRP strip managed to carry the load. And actually, we stopped the test rather than continuing until complete failure of the GFRP. It could have carried more load. You can see this, I mean, GFRP strip alone can take the load, maybe nearly half of the, probably about 40% of the maximum load, which is very good. So this is very good. If you recall the previous pictures I shown, that was to real buildings where glass panels completely removed from the building structure. That situation would not have happened if we had this type of arrangement where the reinforcement could have resisted the load after the peak load. Okay, so that's mean, so it obviously this reinforcement concept increased the load capacity, and more than the increase in the strength capacity. I'm more happy about this ductility performance, because usually we think, everyone feel glass is a brittle material, it has no ductility, but actually we can ensure ductility in even glass structures through this reinforcement concept. And this is for the annealed glass, and this is for the heat strengthened glass. So it also shows similar characteristic, and obviously low capacity of the heat strengthened glass is higher compared to the basic annealed glass, because glass has high strength. So we can say the concept work for both the annealed glass as well as the heat strengthened glass. Good. Yeah, I mean, I want to summarize this presentation because it's just a 10 minutes presentation. So I can say that appropriate use of glass can make buildings more sustainable, but however, in current design practice, glass is very fragile in a building structure and unsafe in a extreme load event case. But however, there's a potential, and joint is the weakest point. So reinforcement concept for joints actually has potential to make glass structures more resilient and sustainable. Good. With that, I would like to thank you for the symposium organizers for inviting me for this presentation, and you can contact me if you're interested in knowing more details, and also if you are interested in knowing more about glass design, because glass design is not as common or famous as reinforced concrete design or steel structural design or even timber design, but there are some new information developing. For example, this recently published early this year, this technical publication from Institution of Structural Engineers on structural aspect of cladding. We have a lot of details about glass design, where I was a co-author of this iStructive publication, whereas also a steering committee member. Okay, good. Again, thank you for everyone, and hope we can join live now. If you have any questions or any details, I'm more than happy to talk with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mithila. Excellent presentation and excellent research as well on technical aspects of glass and how it can be used in buildings. We have Mithila with us in the audience. So any questions? By the way, sorry, I said you're from Southampton. Looks like
no, actually, you're right. It's previously I was there, and recently I moved to Manchester. So it's actually, I should have explained earlier.
No problem.
Right.
No problem.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Any questions to Mithila from the audience? Any questions?
This is slightly out of the scope of the overall conference, I believe. Disaster risk.
No, not really, because it's building technologies and how we can integrate them into our built.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to send the abstract. I think the conference was originally planned to held in March, is that right? I mean, yeah, early this year.
Yeah. But can I ask one question, Nathan? So,
Yep.
is these technologies are being used in even in the UK, or is it at the conceptual stage as of now?
No, my study is as a proof of concept study, and we have some interest from industrial partners. Yeah, no, and not at the moment. No, I mean they just use these bolted joints.
Okay, good luck with the work, and hopefully it will come as a new technology in buildings. Yeah. Any observations, Janat? Anything?
For example, sharing data.
Actually, Doctor, this is very interesting presentation. I think this can be used in the high-risk zones, hospital, emergency, there are surgery theaters, and this is, I think, very useful for our business sector to try this. I think. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Okay, thank you. I mean, if you're anyone interested in more about glass structures, I'm more than happy to join later. I mean, if you want to email me, etc. And also, in
Absolutely.
addition to what you said, conference chair, I mean, high-rise hotels as well, because recently there was an incident in England where a glass funnel fall from the top of top floor of a hotel, famous hotel in London, and killing a driver. Unfortunately, a coach driver, he was, I think, went to toilet or something, and then unfortunately it was fall on the top of his head. Yeah, he was extremely unlucky.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, but still, good new technology to sort of improve the buildings, etc. And as Janet said, something that probably we can use in emergency shelters and coastal areas, etc., to make the
Yeah.
buildings more resilient. Thank you, Mithila.
Okay,
We
thank
move.
you, you as well as the organizers. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. So we move into the next presentation. From technical aspects, now we move into climatic weather conditions. The next presentation is from Mr. Sarath Premalal from the Association of Disaster Risk Management Professionals, Sri Lanka. Sarath is going to present about the extreme rainfall in December 2018, which affected northern Sri Lanka. Buddhi, can you play the video, please? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Premalal, and the other co-authors for this study is Ms. Avanti Koilavatta from UNDP and Mr. Iprajan from DMC. So today's topic is case study on the impact of extreme rainfall on 22nd early morning on the paddy cultivation in Kilinochchi district. So these are the outlines of the presentation. The first current flood early warning dissemination in a nutshell, an extreme rainfall event on 22nd early morning, impact from the extreme rainfall event, atmospheric behavior related to the event, and finally gaps and solution to improve early warning until last mile. So this is the current early warning dissemination in Sri Lanka. So Department of Meteorology issue short range weather forecast three times per day at 5:30, 12:30, and 17:30, and it disseminate to DMC and the other stakeholders. So if they expect some extreme rainfall, they issue this special weather advisory to the irrigation department, DMC, and other stakeholders. So considering the river water levels and tank water levels, and using flood models, they issue the possibility of flood to the DMC and their stakeholders. So DMC disseminate the rainfall forecast and the flood forecast for the DDMCU, and then DDMCU disseminate it to the district level organization including the irrigation department. So this is the event, the extreme rainfall event on 22nd early morning. Heavy rains occurred during early morning on the 22nd December 2018 in northern province of Sri Lanka. So within 2 hours, the precipitation level rose up to 300 millimeter at some places over the catchment of Edamadu Tank. So you can see some heavy rainfall figures here, and caused impact along the downstream of the Edamadu Tank. So Edamadu Tank is somewhere here. This is Edamadu catchment. So this is the downstream. The Kilinochchi and Vavuniya district also received flash flood. This is the forecast issued on Met Department on 21st early morning. So they mentioned the shower condition and the locations and the reason and the expected heavy rainfall. Even it mentioned in the numerical weather prediction model, but it did not indicate any extreme rainfall event over the northern part. But the next day, northern part received heavy rainfall and caused flood. So these are the impacts from the extreme rainfall event. The Iramadu tank was spilled and impacted 4 people in downstream. So the other major tank is Kanagambikai. There are no spill gates, and the 2008 flood was due to the overflow of the tank. Only the urban areas were flooded from the spilling of Kanagambikai tank. People in the area were affected with huge property losses, but there was no loss of life. In addition, large number of houses, livestock, agriculture, small and medium entrepreneurs, and inland fishing and roads were also affected in the Kilnochi district. The affected districts are Murtiu, Kilnochi, Mena, Vaunia, and Jaffna, almost all the northern province. So 8,500 people had been sheltered in 52 welfare camps. All and Mulatiu and Kilnochi were the most affected, and they recorded the highest one-day rainfall over the area since 1983. So these are the damages. So you can see paddy, that agriculture sector, the loss estimation was 2,200 million rupees, and when it when you consider breakouts, the breakout damages. So paddy cultivation was the most damaged sector with this flood. So the reason is just after the just below the Irnamuru tank. So there are many paddy areas, and even the most of the settlements also there. So these are the two divisions mostly affected in the Kilnochi district. So you can see the front history in Kilnochi. So for the 40 years, 1980 to 2009, Kandavala and Karachi received more than 25 flood events, right? And northeast monsoon season is the most vulnerable season for the flood. They just focus for the atmospheric behavior related to the event. So you can see the wind pattern and the pressure distribution a particular day. So there was a low pressure area, and associated to the low pressure area there was a strong circulation. So you can see the eastern flow and northeastern flow converge over the north part of Sri Lanka. So it helps to enhance atmospheric upward motion over the northern part in Sri Lanka. Analysis further extended to find the pressure vertical velocity, that is omega. So just according to the previous slide, you showed the convergence over northern part. So I just consider this one and find the pressure vertical velocity over here. So I just consider the air column over this area, and it indicated very strong upward motion, that is able to develop clouds. So climatological northern province receives highest rainfall during northeast monsoon. So you can see this, and not only that, even the low pressure areas develop in the Bay of Bengal, which is directly affected to Sri Lanka, also developed during November and December. So you can see the past some of the past cyclone developed over the Bay of Bengal. And the other reason is heavy rainfall can be expected over the north and eastern part with the easterly wave approaching from the Bay of Bengal. That also a reason. And when we summarize, you can see November and December, north and east, not only north and east, even the other part get heavy rainfalls due to cyclones and low pressure areas. And mid-December to January, there is a possibility to get heavy rainfall with the easterly waves. And early December, heavy rainfall can be associated with the onset of. So finally, I'll explain the gaps and solution to improve early warning until last mile. So Department of Meteorology issued a forecast by mentioning the possibility of heavy rainfalls. So you showed that it mentioned that fairly heavy falls about 75 millimeter can be expected. So the forecast amount is underestimated. And on 21st December, water level of Irnamuru tank was just 4 feet below the spill gates. And according to the DUM forecast, it predicted heavy rainfalls around 75 millimeter on the particular day. So rainfall at Kilnoche during the daytime on 21st was 40 millimeter, and they expected 35 millimeter at night, and according to that they calculate the amount of water, and they identified that is not enough to fill this 4 feet. So that was one of the gap. So Department of Meteorology cannot provide exact amount of rainfall. They just mentioned the possibility of rainfalls, but they misunderstand the forecast. And the weather when we see the weather prediction at Department of Meteorology, so with the existing infrastructure, Department of Meteorology issue weather forecast and early warning by using observational atmospheric data, numerical weather prediction, satellite data, and their knowledge and experience. So atmospheric analysis based on global observational data, that is data updates every 6 hours. So they use that, and numerical weather prediction 2 times per day. So, and they use satellite images also. So with this information and the availability of it is not able to predict the exact amount of rainfall. Only possibility of heavy rainfall can be predicted. So to improve the warning capabilities, more frequent observation are necessary after issue and early warning, and ground observation should done continuously. And it is important to install Doppler to identify heavy rainfall. And the better stakeholder coordination should be implemented, and synergized SOP to be prepared to establish better communication network. So real-time observation also important. So these are some examples for real-time observation, and limited area modeling capacity should be strengthened at the Department of Meteorology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarat. Sorry about the technical issues that we had with the presentation. I think there was a bit of a voice volume issue there. Thanks very much, Mr. Sarat. Any questions from the audience to Sarat? I'm conscious of the time. We have to finish the session quickly as well for the next session to start. But one question probably from the audience. Mr. Sarat, can I invite Janat? Any observations or comments in this regard?
No, thank you, Doctor. I think we have to appreciate Mr. Sarat for presenting today. He's having a lot of with the bad medical condition also. Thank you very much, Mr. Sarat, for presenting today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Other thing is my presentation will be some technical. There are many technical matters, and even today I cannot speak well because I had some accident yesterday. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining the conference, Mr. Sarat, with all the difficulties and everything, and we hope that you will get better soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next presentation, we move into the final presentation. It's from Preeti. Preeti is presenting from her MSc research at University of Moratuwa, something similar to the work that Sarat presented, and she is going to talk about how climate change and land use changes have affected the flood risk in Borlasgamuan area in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Can you please play the video, Buddhi, please? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to give a summary of my case study, which is pluvial flooding in urban areas, and Borlasgamu UC area is taken as the case. People around the world are at risk of pluvial flood, causing huge economic losses with risk to human life in extreme cases. Most common flood is when water levels in rivers rise and overtop their banks, which is called as fluvial floods. Another is floods is in coastal areas due to high tide and stormy conditions. Less well understood flood is pluvial floods, which is rain-related floods. Pluvial flooding occurs when extreme heavy downpours saturate the urban drainage system and excess water cannot be absorbed. This is dangerous because they occur without prior warning. Stress factors for pluvial flooding is climate changes, land use changes due to urbanization. Urban areas are particularly vulnerable to this due to their impermeable surfaces, such as paved roads, parking lots, and rooftops, which prevent from infiltration and generate increased surface runoff, which will then lead to pluvial flooding. This study deals with pluvial floods occurrence in urban areas, and Boralaskamu UC area was taken as the case. It analyzed recent changes in the characteristic of extreme rainfall, land cover changes over time, and recent drainage development projects done in this area and their implication for flood frequency. Urban flood data before 1990 was not available, maybe because frequency of floods was not significant as urbanization was at minimum. Colombo metropolitan area and suburbs have rapidly developed during recent past with the change of global economy. More factories and industries were established in Colombo and surrounding areas since 1980s with the implementation of open economy policy in Sri Lanka. Parallel to this, garment manufacturing industries were established in Colombo and surrounding areas under the BOA. Hence, more buildings and housing complexes were established with this migration from rural areas. Although from the available records, year-to-year correlation of rainfall and flood events was not possible, it can be shows major floods were mostly associated with high recurrence intervals. This photograph dated 1st November 2012 and rainfall on 31st October 2012 was 142.6 millimeters. To analyze change in rainfall pattern, I have taken annual rainfall data from 1980 to 2019. And to analyze land cover change, years 1975, 1992 and 2016 was investigated using satellite remote sensing data. To investigate about the effectiveness of drainage redevelopment activities, a questionnaire and interviews were used. Study area is Boralaskamu UC area, which is in Colombo district and in Veras River Basin. Bellang Vilathidiya wetland also is here, which is higher in biodiversity, including some endemic species. There are 18 GN divisions. Actually, there are 3 objectives of this study. One is to determine recent changes of rainfall and its impact for flood frequency. Second is to determine land use changes and how these changes had affected for urban flooding of this area. Third is to find out the effectiveness of flood mitigation activities of this area. To analyze rainfall data, both Colombo and Ratmalana rain stations were used since there is no rain station at Boralaskamu. Methodology used for rainfall data analysis, one was linear annual trend from 1980 to 2019 and compared coefficient of variation between the periods 1980 to 1999 and 2000 to 2019. Then got percentile based extremes considering 90th percentile for heavy and 95th percentile for very heavy. Methodology used for land use change was Landsat images for 3 years, which are 1975, 1992, and 2016, and also administrative map of Boralaskamu. Here I used ArcGIS technique by using isocluster unsupervised classification. 4 classes are reclassified as built-up vegetation, marshy and paddy area, and water body. These are the satellite images used. A questionnaire was given to 50 randomly selected residents above 18 years of age to find out how long they have been experiencing flood, frequency of flooding after the drainage redevelopment project, and their perception of the causes of flood in the area, damages, future flood occurrence, etc. An interview was done with a senior officer at Sri Lanka Land Reclamation Development Corporation to gather information of Veras River project. Results from rainfall data analysis are as below. Slight increase in trend for annual rainfall at both stations. And variability has been increased at both stations. And extremes also show some increase in trend. This is the result of 3 images after classification of satellite data. Green color is taken for vegetation and marsh area, while pink is the built-up area. This clearly shows how built-up area is increased and vegetation and marsh area is significantly reduced. Result was built-up area has increased from 0.66 square kilometers to 6.49 square kilometers from 1975 to 2016. The percentage of change was 883.3%. And vegetation has decreased from 5.9 to 1.96, giving a percentage of change minus 66.8. There is an increase of water body when compared to 1975 and 2016, maybe due to build-up ponds by the project. Marshy paddy area was decreased from 4.28 square kilometers to 2.13, giving minus 50.2%. People's perception of causes of flood was intense rainfall 71.4%, lack of drainage 65.3%, blocked drains 40.8%, defective drains 38.8%, building along waterways 44.9%, and uncontrolled property development 57.1%. Majority agreed intense rainfall is the key factor for flooding in the area. People's view was flood had drastically reduced after Veras River project, but the area hadn't got very heavy rainfall after 2010, which was about 300 millimeters. Conclusions and recommendations are, in this study it was shown annual rainfall trend was slightly increasing and variability has increased. Although we couldn't do a year-to-year correlation against flood and rainfall intensity, with historical data we saw flood occurred after heavy rain. This area city growth was from 0.66 square kilometers to 5.83 square kilometers. This has increased total impervious cover, which will lead to pluvial floods. Veras River project was a well-planned drainage redevelopment project, but if legislative bodies are not strong and stop building along flood pathways, these improved drainages will not be sufficient to cope up intense rain situations like we experienced in 2010, which was 382 millimeters per day. Rainwater harvesting can be implemented, thereby leading people into the practice of saving water as a resource and introducing pervious paving for stormwater control. These are the references of the study. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you very much, Preeti. I think we have both co-authors of the paper, Preeti and Sarat, with us in the audience. Any questions to the presenters? Okay, there's a question on chat from Roshani. Roshani is asking, I've got a little question. May I please know your views about the potential impact of the recent drainage upgrading projects in the Borlesgamu area? Have you paid attention to this within your research? So Roshani is asking about the potential impact of recent drainage upgrading within the Borlesgamu area. Preeti or Sarat, if you can answer, please.
Yes, actually this Veras River project is very good project, which is done after a thorough study. And still the constructions are going on at different levels. We have to accept the fact that the urban flooding is reducing significantly, and that is the view of the people as well, and the land value also has increased. But we have to keep in mind that we had not got a rainfall hitting 200 millimeters. So we actually can't tell, like in 2010, we got a rainfall like 382 millimeters. So we, at the moment, the rainfall, this drainage system is actually very good, but we can see from the study that vegetation and the marsh areas has drastically reduced. So because of that, we have to see the impact if we get a heavy rainfall about 200 millimeters.
Thanks, Preeti. Thank you. Thanks, Roshani, for the question, and thanks, Preeti, for the clarification and also for your presentation. Any more questions from the audience? Janat, any observations on this, on Preeti's presentation? Janat, your microphone is muted.
Hello, Doctor.
Any observations on this presentation?
I think this is very relevant presentation, Doctor. I think very first presentation, the presenter also said we need to have a community resilience and the local government awareness. This is what if the local government are properly using their planning process for the land use planning and this building approval, and this is we can some sort of mitigate or reduce this type of disasters. I think these are the biggest challenges we are facing today. How did educate local governments for the proper land use? This is very interesting presentation. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna. Thanks very much to all our presenters. Before we conclude the sessions, any burning questions to our panel of presenters? Any question from the audience to any of our presenters today? We are about 10 minutes over the time, but it's fine by conference norms, so we can take a few more minutes, I guess. The next session is not going to start until 4:45, so we got about 5 minutes anyway. Any questions? If not, we would. I'm going to sort of conclude the session. I think we had a thank you very much for all our presenters. We had very interesting presentations, brilliant because not only because they are good pieces of research, but also because we had presentations looking at different aspects of disaster risk reduction, from social issues to economic issues, technical issues, then projections and weather variable related research as well. I guess if I'm to sort of try to summarize the messages to sort of come out of this session, some of sort of high level messages. I think that from first presentation, we sort of realized the need for a community level disaster risk reduction initiative, especially to move people away from a dependency culture and promote preparedness and disaster resilience. We looked at the need for preparedness and in the business sector, so that they can capture the business opportunities presented by disaster events and make use of those business opportunities. So the business readiness for disasters for our and the economy to benefit from it. And we also saw that there was evidence that economy can in fact benefit from disasters as well. So the importance of individual businesses being ready to capture the opportunities presented, and the importance of their individual resilience. And then from Nimasha's presentation, the story, kind of the high level message to emerge was the importance of balancing the building back better concept with speedy recovery as well, considering the socio-economic issues, etc., of people affected. Then from Mithila's presentation, we sort of realized the importance of integrating new technologies into our built environment to improve and enhance the disaster resilience or flood protection, disaster protection of our built environment, built assets, buildings, especially in critical infrastructure, as Janat said, so that they can withstand the effects of disaster events. Then from Sarat's presentation, the importance of early warning and getting the communities involved and conveying the message to the community as soon as possible, a correct message to the communities as soon as possible so that they can take action. And then from Preeti and Sarat's presentation, final presentation, I guess the high level message to emerge was the importance of land use planning and again using environmental based protection methods like rainwater harvesting, permeable sort of surfaces, etc., and especially the use of proper land use planning and making sure those land use planning guidelines are properly followed when it comes to actual practice. I guess there are some of the main messages to emerge from the session today. Janat, I went quite quickly, but I hope I have sort of summarized the key messages to emerge from our session today. Janat, anything you would like to add in this regard?
I think, Doctor, you did an excellent job. You have covered all the points very comprehensively. To add one point is I think we have to thank all the presenters for their excellent hard work, excellent presentation. I think this will be a good opportunity. I think all researchers are good opportunity for our business sector, how they can prepare for how they can support the emergency response and recovery. I think thank you very much for your excellent sharing this session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Janat. Thank you very much for adding the practical industry and the policymaker and practitioner perspective to all our presentations today. Thank you very much again, as Janat said, to all our presenters for your excellent presentations, the excellent research presented, and it's brilliant to see as a Sri Lankan myself and person coming from Sri Lanka, it's brilliant to see a lot of research happening centered on Sri Lanka. Obviously, that can help make a positive contribution to the situation in the country and outside the country as well at a global level. So that's brilliant to see. Please go ahead, continue your research and engage with each other. We saw that different research sort of have the same sort of message as well. For example, the first presentation and last presentation, they had, although they were focused on two different areas, sort of highlighted the importance of same issue. So please engage with each other, keep the debate going. I guess the abstract book of abstracts would have all the email addresses, etc., of the presenting authors. So if you have any questions, you can get back to them, contact them, connect with them, and if you have any suggestions to, we have quite a good number in the audience. So if you have any suggestions to improve their work, if you can help in any regard, please do. Thank you very much again for all the presenters. Thank you very much for Janat for being my co-chair. Thank you very much for the audience. Thank you very much for the organizing committee, Buddhi, and the team for supporting us technically. Thanks all. Have a good afternoon, good day, good evening, depending on where you are. With that, we would like to bring this session to a close. Thanks very much, everyone.